Switzerland, and Jeff Buckley was playing, and we went to see him, and it was mind-altering. I knew Freddie quite well, and he was a wonderful guy, you know. And, we used to sit and talk about...
We're going to carry on until we've finished that. Give them 25.
What if I told you that Robert Plant, the golden-haired god of rock and roll, secretly despised some of the biggest names in music history? The man who gave us Stairway to Heaven and screamed his way through Whole Lotta Love has been carrying grudges for over 50 years. And now, at age 76, the shocking truth is finally coming out. Picture this. It's 1975, and Robert Plant is standing backstage at a music festival. His long blonde hair catches the stage lights like spun gold, and thousands of fans are chanting his name. But instead of basking in the glory, Plant is watching another performer with pure hatred burning in his eyes. This wasn't just about music. This was about something much deeper, something that would eat at him for decades. Today, we're going to uncover 6 musicians who made Robert Plant's blood boil. These weren't friendly rivalries or playful competition. These were bitter feuds that revealed the darker side of rock's most mystical frontman. From vocal battles to spiritual wars, Plant saw these artists as threats to everything he held sacred about rock and roll. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into the twisted world of rock star hatred, where gods clash and legends are born from pure spite. Let's start our countdown with number 6, and trust me, you won't believe who made this list. Roger Daltrey, the Screaming Machine. Roger Daltrey of The Who was everything Robert Plant thought a rock singer shouldn't be. While Plant was weaving magic with his voice, mixing ancient Celtic stories with modern rock power, Daltrey was just screaming his lungs out. At least, that's how Plant saw it. Picture 2 of Britain's greatest rock voices going head-to-head in the early 1970s. Plant had his mystical, spiritual approach to singing. He believed every note should carry deep meaning, like he was channeling ancient spirits through his voice. Then there are what I spirit. He was Daltrey, swinging his microphone like a weapon and belting out songs with pure, raw power. The problem wasn't that Daltrey couldn't sing. The problem was that people loved his straightforward, no-nonsense style just as much as Plant's complex vocal gymnastics. And that drove Plant absolutely crazy. According to people who worked with Plant back then, he would watch The Who's performances like a hawk. He'd study every move Daltrey made, every note he sang. Then he'd turn to his friends and complain that Daltrey was all muscle and no magic. Plant believed that true rock singing required poetry, mystery, and spiritual connection. To him, Daltrey was just yelling really loud and getting praised for it. The rivalry got worse when both bands started competing for the same festival slots across Europe. Imagine being at a music festival in 1975, watching 2 of the world's greatest rock bands trying to outdo each other night after night. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a guitar pick. Plant's biggest frustration was that critics and fans treated Daltrey's simple, direct approach as equal to his own carefully crafted vocal art. It was like comparing a sledgehammer to a paintbrush, Plant thought. Both could be effective, but only one was true art. The funny thing is, Daltrey never seemed to notice Plant's hostility. In interviews, he would praise Plant's incredible vocal range and call him one of the best singers in rock. But Plant couldn't get past the fact that Daltrey represented what he saw as rock's primitive, unthinking side. To Plant, great rock music should lift your soul, not just make your ears ring. Ian Anderson, the fake mystic. At number 5, we have Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. And this feud was all about who was the real deal when it came to ancient music and mystical vibes. Both Plant and Anderson were fascinated by old folk songs, medieval history, and the spiritual side of music. But Plant believed he had a genuine, natural connection to these ancient traditions, while Anderson was just playing dress-up and pretending to be deep. Think about it from Plant's perspective. He grew up in the English countryside, surrounded by old castles and ancient stories. He felt like the spirits of long-dead Celtic musicians were literally speaking through him when he sang. His connection to the past felt real and sacred. Then along comes Ian Anderson, standing on one leg, playing his flute, and singing about medieval times and old gods. To Plant, this looked like a smart guy who had read a bunch of history books and decided to turn ancient culture into a stage show. The competition between them heated up in 1971 when both musicians were exploring similar themes in their music. Plant was drawing from Welsh folklore and genuine Celtic trar, additions that he claimed to feel in his bones. Anderson was creating elaborate concept albums about historical periods and mythical characters. Music writers started comparing their approaches to British musical heritage, and Plant hated being lumped in with what he saw as Anderson's academic approach. Plant didn't want to be seen as someone who studied ancient music. He wanted to be seen as someone who lived it, breathed it, and channeled it directly from the source. The breaking point came at a folk festival in 1974. Plant actually scheduled his performance at the same time as Anderson's set, making sure fans would have to choose between them. When asked why, Plant reportedly said he wouldn't share a stage with someone who treated their musical ancestors like research subjects. Anderson never seemed to understand why Plant disliked him so much. He would give interviews calling Plant genuinely passionate about tradition. But for Plant, Anderson represented something he despised: fake mysticism. Plant believed you either had a real spiritual connection to ancient music, or you were just putting on a costume and pretending. Geddy Lee, the robot singer. Number 4 takes us to Canada and Geddy Lee of Rush, a feud that was really about the future of rock music and whether technology was killing its soul. By the mid-1970s, rock music was getting more complex and technical. Bands like Rush were creating intricate compositions with complicated time signatures and virtuoso performances. Geddy Lee's high-pitched, precise vocals were a perfect fit for this new progressive style. But to Robert Plant, it sounded like a computer trying to sing. Plant had built his career on raw emotion and human passion. When he sang, you could hear pain, joy, longing, and power all mixed together. His voice cracked sometimes, went sharp or flat occasionally, and that was part of its beauty. It was perfectly imperfect, like all human emotion. Then he'd hear Geddy Lee singing with mathematical precision, hitting every note exactly right, never wavering, never showing vulnerability. To Plant, this wasn't singing, this was vocal engineering. The generational divide made things worse. Younger fans were starting to prefer Rush's cerebral technical approach over Led Zeppelin's bluesy emotional power. Plant watched his influence waning as a new generation of listeners chose brain over heart, precision over passion. When Plant heard songs like Tom Sawyer on the radio, he would reportedly cringe and ask where the human soul was in any of it. He saw Geddy Lee as representing everything wrong with rock's evolution, away from its emotional roots. The sad part is that Lee had nothing but respect for Led Zeppelin and Plant's influence on rock music. He never knew that one of his heroes was secretly disgusted by his approach to singing. Lee was just doing what came naturally to him, creating the kind of music he loved. But Plant couldn't get past what he saw as the dehumanization of rock music. To him, Lee represented a future where perfect technique mattered more than genuine feeling, where being right was more important than being real. Freddy Mercury, the ultimate showman. Now we reach number 3, and this one might surprise you. Robert Plant was jealous of Freddie Mercury, but not for the reasons you might think. Plant had always prided himself on his stage presence. He was the golden god, commanding audiences with his mystical energy and spiritual connection to the music. Fans would lose themselves in his performances, feeling like they were witnessing something sacred and otherworldly. Then Freddie Mercury came along and changed everything. Mercury didn't just perform for audiences. He owned them completely. When Freddie walked on stage, Every single person in the arena became his willing servant. He could make 80,000 people sing in perfect harmony with a simple gesture. He could command silence with a look and create chaos with a smile. Plant had never seen anything like it. Mercury's control over crowds was so absolute, so effortless, that it made everyone else's stage presence look amateur by comparison. And the worst part? Mercury made it look easy. Plant would actually sneak into Queen concerts, wearing disguises so no one would recognize him. He'd watch Mercury command the stage like a divine emperor, and he'd leave feeling frustrated and inadequate. Here was someone doing what Plant did, but so much better that it wasn't even close. The torture for Plant was that he recognized Mercury's genius, but couldn't figure out how to compete with it. Plant's mystical approach worked beautifully, but Mercury's theatrical mastery was on another level entirely. It was like comparing a really good actor to someone who wasn't acting at all, who was just naturally, effortlessly magnetic. In interviews, Plant would acknowledge Mercury's incredible talent while questioning whether what he did was still rock music or something else entirely. There was performing, Plant said, and then there was ruling. Mercury ruled. The competitive tension became obvious when both bands headlined major festivals. Plant would refuse to watch Queen's sets from backstage because seeing Mercury's perfection was too painful. He'd admit to his roadies that watching Mercury made him realize limitations he didn't know he had. Mercury, for his part, seemed to understand Plant's mixture of admiration and resentment. He'd compliment Plant in interviews, calling him a beautiful singer with beautiful hair, but there was always a hint of superiority in his praise. For Plant, Mercury represented something unreachable. Natural stage command that exposed everyone else's trying too hard. David Bowie, the chameleon. At number 2, we discover Plant's most complex artistic grudge, David Bowie. This feud wasn't about vocal technique or stage presence. This was about artistic freedom, and it cut Plant deeper than any other rivalry because it highlighted his own creative prison. Throughout the 1970s, David Bowie was constantly reinventing himself. Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, the Berlin Years. Bowie got to be a different artist with every album. He could explore any musical style he wanted, create any persona that inspired him, and critics praised his fearless creativity. Meanwhile, Plant felt trapped. Led Zeppelin's massive success had turned him into a brand. Fans expected him to be the mystical, long-haired rock god forever. The band's established sound meant he couldn't experiment too wildly without disappointing millions of people who wanted more of the same. Plant would watch Bowie's transformations obsessively, studying each new incarnation with a mixture of admiration and bitter jealousy. He'd complain to friends that Bowie got to be a different artist every album, while he was expected to be the same mystical hippie forever. Bowie had complete creative freedom while Plant was locked into being Robert Plant. The frustration ate at him because Plant knew he had more artistic range than he ever got to show. He had ideas for different types of music, different approaches to songwriting, different ways of expressing himself. But Led Zeppelin's success was both a blessing and a curse. It gave him everything he'd ever dreamed of, but it also locked him into a box he couldn't escape. When Plant started working on solo projects in the 1980s, the artistic envy became even more acute. Here was his chance to explore different musical territories, but he still couldn't match Bowie's fearless reinvention. At industry parties, Plant would actually avoid Bowie's table because being near him reminded Plant of all the musical territories he'd never get to explore. The tragedy of this feud was that both men were incredibly talented artists who respected each other's work. But Plant couldn't get past his jealousy of Bowie's artistic liberty. Some artists get to explore every corner of their creativity, Plant once said, while others become prisoners of their own success. Mick Jagger, the ultimate enemy. And finally, we reach number 1, Mick Jagger. This wasn't just a rivalry. This was pure, burning hatred that lasted for decades. To understand this feud, you have to understand what the blues meant to Robert Plant. This wasn't just music to him. This was his religion, his calling, his reason for existing. Plant believed he was chosen to carry on the sacred tradition of blues music, to honor the great black musicians who had created this art form and channel their spirits through his voice. Then he looked at Mick Jagger and saw someone turning that sacred tradition into a pantomime. In Plant's eyes, Jagger didn't feel the blues. He just wore them like a costume. Jagger's stage moves, his pouty lips, his calculated sexuality, all of it seemed fake to Plant. Where was the genuine emotion? Where was the spiritual connection to the music's roots? The hatred started in the late 1960s and only got worse as both bands became more successful. Plant would watch Jagger's performances and seethe with rage. He'd rant to anyone who would listen about how Jagger had turned the blues into a show, how he was mocking everything sacred about this music while critics praised his genius. The breaking point came at a 1973 industry gathering where Plant actually confronted Jagger face to face. According to witnesses, Plant accused Jagger of making a mockery of everything sacred about rock music while everyone pretended it was brilliant. For Plant, this wasn't about vocal technique or stage presence. This was about artistic integrity and respect for musical tradition. He saw Jagger as someone who had commercialized and trivialized the spiritual blues foundation that Plant considered his life's sacred calling. The most painful part was that Jagger's approach worked. Fans loved the Rolling Stones' theatrical take on blues and rock music. Critics praised Jagger's charisma and showmanship. The whole world seemed to prefer style over substance, moves over meaning. Jagger, to his credit, never publicly responded to Plant's attacks. He remained diplomatically silent throughout his career, which probably made Plant even angrier. How do you fight someone who won't fight back? This feud revealed the deepest part of Plant's personality, his belief that rock music should be spiritual, not just entertainment. To him, Jagger represented the ultimate artistic betrayal, turning something sacred into something superficial for fame and money. The truth behind the hatred. So what was really going on here? Why did Robert Plant, one of rock's most successful artists, harbor such bitter grudges against his fellow musicians? The truth is that Plant's hatred reveals his own deepest insecurities and fears. He was terrified that his spiritual approach to music wasn't as valid as other people's techniques. He was afraid that his mystical persona was just another act, no more authentic than what he accused others of doing. Every musician on this list represented something Plant felt he lacked. Daltrey's directness, Anderson's intellectualism, Lee's precision, Mercury's command, Bowie's freedom, Jagger's charisma. These weren't just different approaches to music. They were mirrors showing Plant his own limitations. The saddest part is that Plant's insecurities were groundless. Led Zeppelin created some of the greatest rock music ever recorded. Plant's voice was genuinely one of the most powerful and expressive in rock history. His spiritual approach to music touched millions of souls and inspired countless musicians. But success doesn't cure insecurity. Fame doesn't eliminate self-doubt. Even gods can feel threatened by other gods. At 76 years old, Robert Plant has finally begun to acknowledge these old grudges. In recent interviews, he's spoken more openly about his competitive nature and his complex relationships with other artists. Time has given him perspective on feuds that once consumed him. The lesson here isn't that Robert Plant was a bad person, or that these other musicians were unworthy of success. The lesson is that even the greatest artists are human, with all the petty jealousies and fears that come with being human. Rock and roll has always been about more than just music. It's about ego, territory, and the desperate need to matter in a world that often doesn't care. These feuds were really about 6 different approaches to the same impossible goal: using music to touch something eternal and meaningful in a temporary, meaningless world. In the end, maybe Plant's hatred says more about his passion than his personality. He cared so deeply about rock music's spiritual potential that he couldn't stand watching it be used for anything less than transcendence. The final word, and there you have it. The 6 musicians who drove Robert Plant to the edge of madness with jealousy, resentment, and artistic rage. From Roger Daltrey's raw power to Mick Jagger's calculated charisma, each of these artists represented something that Plant both feared and envied. These feuds remind us that even our musical heroes are flawed human beings with petty grudges and bitter jealousies. But they also show us how passionate artists can be about their craft, how much it matters to them that music be done right. Robert Plant's hatred was really love in disguise. Love for rock music's spiritual potential, love for the blues tradition he tried to honor, love for the transcendent power of a great song performed with genuine feeling. What do you think about these revelations? Was Plant protecting rock's sacred traditions, or was he just being petty and jealous? Which of these feuds surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and love hearing your thoughts about rock history's hidden dramas. If this video opened your eyes to the darker side of rock stardom, smash that like button and share it with your fellow music lovers. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the secret stories behind your favorite artists. Trust me, we've got plenty more shocking revelations coming your way. Until next time, keep rocking and remember, even legends have their demons.